Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Um, so obviously we were supposed to start at 7:30. Sorry about that. We are really having some international difficulties at the moment, but we thought we'd come on and just chat to you guys, see how you're doing. We're really excited about this session. Me personally, because Francine is like one of my favorite poets. I have her second collection right here. I did a workshop with her in 2018 that was amazing. So I'm hoping that you guys are really going to enjoy this reading. We're going to be taking questions as well at the end. So make sure you think about what questions you want to ask her so that we can use your questions in the chat and let her know so she can respond. So yeah, basically she's here now. So we're just gonna listen to Francine because you didn't come here for me. You came here for her. So let's just sort that out real quickly, okay?
Hi, Jamelia. Okay, hold on. I have Nina Simone playing in the background and it won't stop. Okay, wait. There we go. Hello. So everything that I did told me that I was to join you at 2:30 my time. I don't know if I did that wrong or because I don't know what happened, but I thought it was at 2:30. But here we are. Here I am. Hi. I can't hear you. Are you muted, Jamelia?
Yes, I muted myself. I'm so sorry. Hi, we're so happy to have you.
I'm happy to have you, even though it's going to be a little more impromptu than I thought, because I was going to pull together a couple things, but
don't worry, we like you live and direct.
We're going to wing it.
We're going to do it. This is the way it is. This is the life of a poet. Like, this is what we do.
Oh my God. Are there people, did people leave?
No, nobody left. Everybody's still like on YouTube, locked in, waiting for you. They're really excited as well.
Oh, I'm really excited. And I thank you for having me here. So I'm just supposed to read some poems and then talk about the book.
And so read, and then like we'll talk about some questions about like around revision.
Yes.
You can give us some tips on how to have free collections because some of us don't have any. And
free collections? What do you mean?
Like poetry collections in the world, like how to get to a place.
You mean like free, like money free?
No, like number 3.
Oh, 3.
Yeah. The number 3.
3. Yes. We can talk about 3. Well, part of it is this, you know, so that's some gray hair there. So that's my justification for 3. You didn't give me a chance to color it. I was going to color it before 2:30.
No, we want it. We want to know. We want to see it all. This is the real life of a poet.
I learned. Listen, I'm going to just silence my devices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just got my book like 2 days ago.
See?
Look at how pretty it is.
It's so pretty.
And this
I love the cover.
It's a hardbound. It's my first hardbound.
Yeah.
So, and the artist, I don't know if y'all know this, but is Shaniqua Gay. She's a Georgia painter. And look at that.
It's beautiful. We're actually going to be giving away a copy of your book in this live.
Yeah, I saw that. Wait, how are you basing this competition? Is it like
I don't know yet.
People to answer the most trivia questions about this reading?
Yeah, maybe the best takeaway from this whole section, we'll get them to tweet it, and then we'll pick the best one.
I haven't really. Well, I read from the galley, but I have not read from this book, and the galley is a little weird because when you have they send you a galley. I think you got the galley, didn't you? You might have gotten a PDF.
No.
Wait, you didn't get a PDF?
No. Was I supposed to?
I thought so.
Oh, well, you can send it to me later. I'd love it.
At any rate, the line breaks are off. So I'm excited to be reading from the real book. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes. Let me check with everybody. Can everyone see and hear? I mean, they're saying hello to you, so I think everybody.
I can't see any of that. I don't know. Wait, is that?
It's on YouTube, so don't worry. But yeah, I think they can all hear you.
Hi guys. Okay, so where to begin? Oh my goodness. I was thinking about, so I'm doing a playlist for this book.
Yes, I was gonna ask you like what goes well with your book, like what snacks, what music.
So there's going to be a whole playlist.
That's amazing.
And one of the poems, one of the songs in that playlist, which is the one that I was writing about right before I missed this call, is called it's Frank Ocean's Nights. And I was talking about it because I feel like my thing is dirty. I was talking about it because I was thinking about yeah, that's a little better. There's a little spilled coffee on it earlier. So I don't know where to start, but the poem happens the song happens in this poem. So I'm going to read this poem, but I think I'm going to follow it up with something because, so I'm going to read 2 long poems, something you shouldn't do at the beginning.
Do it.
I'm going to read 2 long poems, one of which I hardly ever read ever because it's super long. Because I was thinking about transition and since we're talking today about revision and thinking about sort of, not just doing something off the cuff. The poem that this song occurs in is a little off the cuff, but it does have some thought about transition. And then the next poem I'll read is a little bit longer. Okay, so single lines looking forward or one monostitch past 45. The joke is orange, which has never been funny. For a while, I didn't sleep on my bright side. Many airplanes make it through sky. The joke is present, dented, and devil. For a while, yellow spots on the wall. Obama on water skis, the air in his armpits free. I thought the CIA was operative. Across the alley, a woman named Mildred. Above the clouds in a plane, a waistline of sliced white. I don't sound like TED Talk or smart prose on Facebook. These clouds are not God. I keep thinking about Coltrane, how little he talked. This is so little. I give so little. Sometimes when I say something to white people, they say, I'm sorry? During Vietnam, Bob Kaufman stopped talking. The CIA was very good at killing panthers. Mildred in a house coat calling across the fence over her yard. If I were grading this, I'd be muttering curses. The joke is a color for prison. Is it me or is the sentence as structure arrogant? All snow in here, the writing, departure, all miles are valuable, all extension, all stretch. I savor the air with both fingers and tongue. Mildred asked about the beats coming from my car. I forgot to bring the poem comparing you to a garden. Someone tell me what to say to my senators. No one smokes here. In the rain, I duck away and smell piss. I thought the CIA was the Constitution. I feel like he left us for water skis, for kite surfing. The sun will not always be so gracious. From the garden poem, one line stands out. Frank Ocean's Nights is a study in the monostitch. Pace is not breathing on and off, off. Mildred never heard of Gennaro Jarrell. I'm afraid one day I'll find myself remembering this air. The last time I saw my mother, she begged for fried chicken. My father still sitting there upright, a little high. Melissa McCarthy could get it. Sometimes I forget how to touch. In a parking garage, I wait for the toothache. I watch what I say all the time now. She said she loved my touch. She used the word love. In 1984, I'd never been in the sky. My mother walked a laundry cart a mile a day for groceries. Betsy DeVos is confirmed with a broken tie. Mildred's 5 goes way up and my 5 reaches. There's a party in my courtyard and I don't understand that because COVID. But anyway, Yeah, so I wanted to read that poem because I wrote this like, it's a little dated, but then again, everything that has any like political reference is going to feel dated. So I just left it the way it is. But I wrote that poem shortly after the election. If y'all can remember when Melissa McCarthy was on SNL imitating people, that's about the time, because that doesn't really happen anymore. I can't even remember who she was imitating at this point now. Who was it? It might have been, no, it wasn't. I can't, oh, it was that guy who was was it not Stephen Miller? Who was the press conference guy? That's who Melissa McCarthy was doing impressions of. But anyway, like that feels so long ago. But I was thinking about this because, you know, in terms of thinking about creating an arc for something, I think that's where my brain is at today. Thinking about making arc. Like, how do you sort of move from one thing and go towards another thing, so that poems don't feel like, Richard Hugo has this book called Triggering Town that is really kind of all about beginnings and what to do with those beginnings. And so when I wrote this poem, I was finding it very difficult to write, actually, and still am having some hard time given the climate of everything. It just feels like so little of what you say feels critical enough to put it down. So I was like, well, you know, I can start with a line, right? Which is, you know, the notion of a monostychic line means just like one line. You're just kind of focusing on that one thing. So this whole poem is like comprised of just little moments. And, you know, I know that some people do this exercise almost like on a daily thing where you can just kind of keep adding to it. But I think what's interesting about this is that what also happens in this poem, or what happened for me, is that you wind up building toward a place past the first moment. You know what I mean? Like the joke is orange. Obviously, I'm talking about 45, right? Well, Trump. And then kind of like winding your way back to that, which is what got me to Frank Ocean, because I'm thinking Channel Orange. You know what I mean? Like just how things sort of can return and then progress, spiral out, move forward, kind of like gathering. There's a word for this, just gather and then keep going. Amass, things amass, right? So that's one thing. And then, oh God, this poem is so long, but I want to read it to you. Maybe I should read a poem in between the really long poem, because this poem is like, takes up like 4 pages in the book. Okay, I'll read you, let's see. I'm gonna interrupt the length of this and I'm gonna read Rabbit. The rabbit has a funny set of tools. He jumps or kicks, muffled and punching up. In pose, the rabbit knows each side of his face to whom he should belong. He hobbles and eyes. This is the dumb allegiance. This bunny, even dry and fluff, is aware. Be vicious. Will bite down your finger stalk. Will nick you good in the cheery web of your palm. Those claws are good for traction and defense. This bunny, forgive him. There is no ease. His lack of neck is all the senses about a stillness, stuck in a calm, until household numbers upend his floor, until the family upsets the nest and traipses off, then stuck in a bunny panic. We each stab at gratitude. In our nubbing, none of us do well. We jump, we kangaroo, we soft-seeming scatter and gnaw. Maybe the only way forward is to sleep all day, one eye open under the sink. Like the rabbit, we could sit in our shit, chew at the leaves of others' dinners, make of each tile on the floor a good spot to piss. No, it doesn't get much better. And like the rabbit, we do not jump well from heights. We linger the dark until it is safe to come out, to offer a nose, a cheek for touch, the top of a crown. Nothing makes us happier than another rabbit. I wrote that poem when I was living with a rabbit for a minute. Like I was staying with somebody that had a rabbit. And I was like, I thought I liked rabbits until I lived with one. And then I was like, Rabbits are shady. Okay, wait, where did everybody go? I can't see anybody. I don't even know. Okay, anyway. I'm assuming that you all are still there. So I'm sure there's got to.
Everyone's
You're still here. Oh, good. It feels very Truman Show.
We got 15 people watching at the moment on YouTube.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. 15 is a perfect number. Okay, I'm going to read a longer poem, and this is the one that I was saying that I have not read this in a long time. It's in like 3 or 4 sections, I think. And it's called Language Works Over Information. I don't know what else to say about it, but it feels apropos. But transition. So think about like arc and transition. I was thinking about this a lot in this poem. Language works over information. 1. Being alone affects the canvas under language. Its hold, its black through the window, the cloth behind the feud. And by the way, it is a feud, a battle about battling, a conflict over agreement. Language works over information. Someone in the audience says, "You mean works over, like in a fight, like a war?" The author hadn't thought of this, says, "Well, yes." The woman sits back in her seat. As in takes over, as in takes a bullet to a statistic's brain, pulls along generalities in a dead body wagon, plants line mines and long redundancies, red herring, does the editing in hubs of triage. This, the living, barely breathing language. This, the language with no hope for a new organ. Now, this over here language could be saved if only we had enough oxygen. There is no oxygen. But here, this language only needs a suture for its passive voice, a simple interrupted stitch for its drone-on spiel. Language takes information by its hair and rides it, nighttime. It has hardly soft on the reins, is not given space where soft falls. This is always responding in defense of the gallop, in defense of the whip on the croup. Dying is something you have to do on purpose, in words. Like it or not, it's some blood sporter wearing a strip of burlap on its forehead. It's a spelled out gun nut throwing itself on the enemy's sandbag daggers. You think you could say, fuck them, let them think what they want to think. The woman in the audience uncrosses her legs and her arm goes up. So really, language has a bone to pick with information. The author hadn't thought of this, says, well, maybe. But what about the average mark? Language is typical. It only sticks upon repetition, upon trend, when repeated. When repeated, the lone voice isn't always the one winning over information. Just ask a middle schooler why the poet wrote the poem. Because she crazy? The lone voice could be mistaken. Everybody says so. The lonely voice is lonely, listens for someone in the kitchen to break something, thinks it could be worse, it could be an ambient tape for the ones who are left behind, artificially domestic, plates clinking, bags being emptied, the floor being swept, breath in a room. 2. For the absence of language, there is more than one side. Somebody hold me once, like you once held me, unassuming. Don't work over me, not yet. Don't try to win everything, not yet. Don't already be lost, a foregone tendency, a gimmick. Don't already give up. Believe and will. I'll fight you for it, not yet. Wrestle with it. I'll fight you for it, stay. I'll believe it is more than anomaly if that helps. Even an anomaly can catch on if repeated, or repeated could become a trend. Language works over information or works underneath it, like a camp, like that which does not bother to hide its fabrication, to work, that which is the dirt earth housing the explosion underneath itself. You could say language is really trying to kill information for the reduction of dead space, the over and over again suture, that which is blown apart before it takes place, that wound bleeding open, that limb soaking the ground, that tongue parting the lips, a heat traveling through rooms. Only a trained professional can gather the air with decision, can work with this much absent language. The medic begins to feel for the explosion, presses for, below the ground, below the housing of blood and the horizontal mattress suture. Heat spells this one to an open bed. Heat says, this one I'm afraid is gone. Heat moves the medic closer to some thumping heart lay apart, chest blown, mouth tongue ripped out, chest gaping, organs soaking the ground. So language has nothing to lose compared to information. The medic leans forward. The author hadn't thought about this, says, well, no, but the eyes are still fluttering, under information, a kind of anomaly, still working, still trying to move, lone voice to trend, to live above the intelligence, the flash, in the form of language or below information as in final report, below as a sense of heat. Heat moves the medic's hand, says, this one might take. It stands to stutter something. Stitch up the heart. I love you, 2, 3, 4. 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 I love you. I'm going to read one more from this book and then I think a couple from my second book. Ask me now and I would say, I caught my hair on fire in a fist fight. We had decorative words. I took up tree lights in her mouth and thought it was summer. We lit up bits of river like we picked switch. The cockeyed girl snatched off my wigs at the nape. It was all kinds of monstrous. We were all on the ground like gravel and glass. We splattered each other all dusk after campfire snack. Then she beef up while I sat monkey-faced and open-headed, and someone in another cabin bet chicken strips on her appetite. Someone in those moments is sure to get scratched. She grew out her nails for it. I lit her up in the dark. In this retelling, we both spit out hunks of each other on the bathroom lawn where raccoons ditch. In this version, no one succumb, no freeze on a narrative and all explain away bully by her dark-skinned cheek. In this retelling, I get beneath her in the greased grass. I watch the star in her eye and we roll over it. We unbridle that shit. Yeah, that's what. So I guess I'll come back to the language works over information poem because I want to say things about it, but that's the same book. that's the same book. Maybe I'll just read a couple of poems from the second book, which what can I think about in terms of revision for this book? Oh, I know. There's one in here that I could think about in terms of revision. Oh, I don't want to read. Well, I don't want to read that one. Revision. Let's see. I think I'll read this one. Okay, this is called On Not Knowing the Word for Solipsism. Again, a poem that I don't necessarily read very often, but I'm thinking about this poem because I'm thinking about, okay, the word solipsism, it's a philosophical term condition for, I'm sure most of y'all know this, the idea that you are the only person that exists and everyone and everything else is a figment, like a figment of your imagination, to use the redundancy, that everything is an illusion. like reading on a Zoom call. We're like, is there really anybody there? Anyway, and you know, it's useful for all kinds of things. But one of the things that it's useful for is thinking about how much you control, or how little control you actually have versus how much control you could imagine to have had. Because if you're the only one, then you're omnipotent, right? You control everything. But how do you get that into a poem, right? So as thinking about revision in terms of like how to phrase things in a way, and choosing how much to say didactically versus how much you just kind of like let something happen. Okay, so on not knowing the word for solipsism. Take the 6th grade fever and fire the 6 sheets. Shiver in the rain over tubas on the radio, a bloated lung. If I am not on the bus to school, then who is in those pipeline Dartmouth seats? Who to sling backpacks and play Atari and slip paper spitball into straws? Who to snap open umbrellas to poke at whom? Who in the bus moving rain over gravel, over pothole, over under overpass? Whose chair pad squeaks? Or whose wheels spun out, whose brakes to grind? Whose muddy shoes on whose feet, or whose pencil prone with sharp tip? Whose punch, pinch, grope to want? Once we get there, no one to hide with, no cubbies to huddle and blushing, no crowds to mumble under, no sun to come in first thing and open wide. And then it actually reminds me of another longer poem, the one that I kind of just published about Kanye, talking about slavery was a choice, but I don't feel like reading that poem. Y'all can find it online. It got published in the New York Review of Books. But it's just, it's a lot, that poem. I don't feel like reading it today. I want something a little more joyful too, or at least a little more something. Oh, here's a something, a little more something. It's not joy, but it's something. Okay. More about control. Okay. I think I'm a control freak. Wounded, the sway it aches. I am wounded and I want the cat call. I want it. Heads hanging out the window, bombinating past ass when I tra-la-la grocery, when I leisure to mailbox, when I struck cobblestone to make laundromat ache for it. I want the old wolf whistle, the bench stoop cubic, a measuring tape with a Pall Mall in his lip doing the curbside cry. I like it, like windshield wipers all over rain. I'm broke again, and I want to get hitched at the liquor store, looking for a wheelchair pimp with a blow pop. The street is empty without him. I am missing the men to dismiss, no one to fight with, crude dick. Of course, one could argue the dip in the back starts to feel dug out. You walk, they walk. You slide, they slow mechanic articulate alongside like wind-up remote, robotic lean low and glimmering teeth with whatever line they can muster in between sunspots and speech. They triangulate duos, three-piece, quarter-son, quintet, sextet, octogenarian. They stumble if you trip them. Oh, street serenade, sing-songing, ooh, don't be so mean, in between the clearing and bus stop. The first holler I get, I might for a strip. That was a good reading time. So now I can talk about the poems.
Tell us about the poems.
Yeah. I wanted to say, sometimes things happen in poems that you can't explain. And things happen, I think that, I don't know how other people feel about it, but that poem that I read, The Language Works Over Information, I wrote that ending with the repetitions and the numbers. And I think I never took it out, but I've always questioned it, like, because I can't justify it to you. I don't know why it's there. I don't know why it works. I don't know why every time I read it, I feel what I feel. I mean, I could probably attribute it to something, but I think, and also I know that there are many times when I have been in class with students and they repeat they like write a repetition like that, like just a word over and over and over again, then I'm sort of like, okay, yes, but like what comes in between that? Like usually when people do that, I'll think, okay, the repetition is powerful, but what may be more powerful is that, well, like I'm saying, like arc, like every time something is repeated, what happens is that this instance is unlike the last instance, right? So what happens in between now, if I just said, maybe it's the numbers in there that force me to kind of like count it out so that it really becomes more like an exercise than a repetition. I don't know what it is. But I also think that for the most part, like repetitions are more useful when they sort of amass, like when you alter a repetition and bring something more to it. I think this might be, I'm not mistaken, I think this might be the only time where I've had something sit like that in a poem and just left it because.
Can we see how it looks on the page?
Yeah, sure. So this yeah, it's right at the end there.
Ah, so the numbers go across. Because when you read it, it sounded almost like a breathing exercise.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and like every time I read it, I get shut up.
That's good.
So, but I think the thing I wanted to say about that poem is the reason I like that poem is because language itself can be so hard to talk about. Like writing is hard to talk about in writing. And I guess maybe one of the things that is hard is that it doesn't often carry the metaphor with it that we like for poetry. Like, I think we come to poetry to understand things differently, mostly via metaphor, or via some kind of vehicle. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's in the sound of something, the vehicle is the thing that sort of gets us to a different kind of relationship to something. And so often that is metaphor. But I like this poem because it's sudden, for whatever reason, the words became like bodies in triage. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I think the metaphor came with just kind of like playing with this ideal of like, if there's information and language is under information or over information, then it's kind of, it exists as a body. You know what I mean? Anyway, so that kind of helped me create an arc. And that's how I was thinking about that poem. Did you have questions for me?
Yes, I do. Don't worry. I'm going to help.
Ramble.
I'm going to help.
Help me focus.
But someone said when you were reading that poem, Nala on YouTube said that they love the way the language is depicted as a soul of its own and that it has its own agenda going back and forth in our lives.
Yeah, totally. I like that too.
Yeah. So I have some questions. The first one is about like the poets that you turn to when you feel like you've forgotten how to write. Like, who are those poets that bring you back to life?
Oh God, that's such an interesting question. Sometimes sometimes it's it depends. I think it changes all the time. Like sometimes it's poets that I take for granted. Like, this in the last year, I've gone back to Langston Hughes and Lucille Clifton because I think there's a way that I take them for granted and realize like every time I go back that I don't fully understand the breadth of them. Like the last time I went back to Langston, I found this play that he'd written. It's called The Suite of, oh God, I can't remember the name of it. But it's this whole experimental play and it's in 12 parts. And it's on jazz, but it's like just more set in kind of a city, and it has it's a very strange like lyric movement through it that I was like, this is not like, this is not how we think about Langston, you know, or Lucille Clifton, and realizing like how much complexity is in her organization of, well, information, like the way that she puts things straightforward. So sometimes I think I go back to writers to think about their fundamentals, like what it is they're doing at a really basic level. It's not, inspire is always a weird word, because I don't know that I necessarily go back to be inspired exactly. I think I actually get more inspired by contemporary authors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I started reading this book by Sasha Banks last night called America Mine. And it's just so beautiful. And like, I saw her read in a Zoom reading recently, but other than that, I just haven't heard of her. Maybe it's just like, this is a circle I'm not traveling in, but it's just this really beautiful book that's so smart about the way that it deals with American iconography, and but lyrically, and like not, I mean, heavy-handed, but in the best sense. Like, it sort of drives something home. It's a really beautiful book. So I think I get more, I get more learning from thinking about like the old folks, the canon, the masters, and like I get really inspired by young new writers.
Someone, Tolly on YouTube said it's definitely easy to do that with Lucille Clifton's work because it's so deceptively simple.
Totally. She's a master, man.
Yeah, that's when you know that you've hit it, right? When you can make something look easy that's incredibly difficult to actually do. Yeah. Do you feel, you talked about like plays and books, what other things creatively help you when you're not writing?
Oh, all of it, man. Like, you know, I'm open. I think poets are interesting because this might sound a little shady, so I'll say no tea, no shade.
Mm-hmm. But lots of shade. Give it to us.
Lots of shade. We are the artists that will consume all of it. Like, we love fiction, we love plays, we love dance, we love theater. And I think more so, you know, I've talked to too many fiction writers who are just kind of like, I don't get poetry. And I'm like, but you're a writer. I don't understand. I get your long narrative, you know, progressive arc. You don't understand mine. It's so sad. It makes me so sad. But no, seriously, you know, and whatever, like maybe that is partly what makes the poetic sense is, you know, a lot of variety is, I think, partly like how you create an experience in a poem. It's not a straightforward thing. It's interesting because it's sort of a soup genre. You know what I mean? Like, you're trying to do all these things. You're trying to do things with language. You're trying to do things with line. You're trying to like think about sound. So it's sort of like a composition in itself. So maybe that's inherent to us. I don't know, but I love all of it.
That's good. So do you think then that like
fiction writers?
No, I know a lot of fiction writers that don't get poetry. It's fine. But I wanted to know, have things changed, like between writing your second book and this one? Were there different things going on for you in terms of themes that were coming out?
Yeah, I was changed. I think the second book, well, so the first book was, in terms of mood, and I've talked about this before, but in terms of mood, I think the first book was a little fighty and confrontational, and I was really into vulgarity and like the sort of the beauty of the guttural, which that book is called Allegiance, and I wrote it while I was in Detroit, so apropos. And then the second book was about whatever, thinking about the aftermath of sexual assault, so very dark, and a little, I guess I might almost, well, I won't say that, but definitely a bit pessimist. I almost said Afro-pessimist, so maybe, but I don't know if I should call it that. And this book is, you know, I was trying to just do something different and sort of, I don't want to say lighten things up, but like I was trying to lift, you know, lift the mood, lift the tone, lift the line. Like, I was trying to think of ways to get it out of the mud. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if the subject matter is still dark sometimes.
Because like I resonate with a lot of the poems in Play Dead. It's definitely a book that I took a lot of time with. Like there were some poems I read and then I had to put the book down and just sit for a while. So in terms of like when you're putting your collections together, do you know beforehand what you're going to write about? Does it just emerge that these are the themes?
The collections? No, they emerge. I mean, as a matter, actually, the next book that I'm writing, I do know what it's going to be about because it's a research project. I don't know what the final form it's going to take, but I know what I'm trying to do. Maybe that's why I'm having such a hard time actually putting it together. But everything else, I think it kind of takes shape, and you just realize that is the preoccupation that makes the most sense. Like, there's other books that I probably have in me in a way that just, how do I say this? This is going to sound really, however it sounds. They're books that I have, poems that I haven't published, things that I could put together, but I don't. Okay, here's a weird thing. I don't want to spend the time or the mental space that it will require to have that book in the world. So, for example, I have a manuscript that are poems about my parents, and I just don't have the headspace to do that. I don't have the headspace to answer questions about it. I don't have the headspace to promote it. I don't have the headspace to like do it the justification it would deserve because it's still just a little too close to the knife, So I guess in a way, like when you're putting together a book, you're sort of also thinking. I was really nervous about Play Dead. I was nervous about what people would ask me about, but I decided it was, I guess sucked it up. And it turns out that it's been great. I mean, the things that I was afraid that people would want to know or want to ask, nobody has, which is kind of impressive. Maybe considering. I don't know. People would ask me much more direct questions about that book, and nobody has.
Well, you were quite direct in the book, so maybe
there's no need, right?
You put it all on the page. I feel like it's there. It's in there.
Yeah, but
yeah.
But I was saying, like, I think, in order to do a final book justice, you have to be ready to carry it in the world and talk about it and
so it's not just the writing, it's the aftermath of it having space.
Yeah, totally.
So someone asked, what is your editing process when with your collections?
Varies, but sometimes I think the most direct, I'll put it that way, the most direct strategy for me in revision is grabbing a poem that for whatever reason, and there's a bunch in there. Well, first of all, write a bunch of poems. Write a lot of really bad poems. That's first.
How many?
So many bad poems. Hundreds.
Okay. No, so this scares me because I read a quote that Roger Robinson said that he writes like 150 poems before he decides there's a collection. And I was like, that's a lot of poems.
Not really.
Maybe not for you.
But first of all, don't forget the gray. Okay, so secondly, I don't think of them as poems. I think of them as drafts, and sometimes I even just think of them as lines. Like scraps of a thing, and I'll title it, and then I'll tuck it away in a folder. And those folders are organized weird too. So anyway, so I'll just go into a folder, and I'll randomly open a document. And then actually, here's usually what I do. And this is always, it's so much fun. It makes me so happy. I'll go to an old folder, like I'll go back 3 years, and I'll go to an old folder and I'll just start looking at the titles. And if I remember like a feeling like, oh, I don't remember writing about that, I'll pull it out. And then my editing process is basically that I look for a theme that feels relevant now, that I might have something else to say to. So if I go back, I'm trying to think what's the most recent thing that I've done that to. There's a book in here, there's a poem in here called It Takes, which is about Frank Stanford, the poet. And the first line is, the Ede in the Negro shows the country boy poet, so she knows the look in his eye. And that was a poem that, you know, I had originally just taken some notes after reading some Frank Stanford, because Frank Stanford makes me feel a kind of way. I like it, but I don't trust it, because it feels, it feels so like, it feels a little like white boy slippery to me sometimes. And like, I love the language, but it's something like, if he was alive, I wonder, I wonder what kind of poet would he be? Would he be more like Morris Manning, or more like Jake Adam York, or more like James Franco? Like, I could sort of see him being any of those things, you know? So I'm a little suspicious of it. But anyway, so I wrote this poem. And so when I went back to the poem, I was just like trying to think like, okay, I saw the Eden and Negro shows the country boy. And I thought, oh, okay, those are interesting. What if they were characters? You know what I mean? So I try to find some kind of thread and then like add like whatever I'm thinking about now, because I want things to, because to me, the best thought about revision is layering, you know, like song, like composition, like you come back to something and you add something to it. You know, cooking feels the same way. You're kind of layering things in. And in a way, I guess the bad news about that is it takes time, you know? It has to, you can't have all the layers in the first draft. Like that's not to say that there's not, you know, bread and butter is great sometimes. You know what I mean? Like sometimes the first layer is great, but like, that's not how you cook, right? So I guess it takes time.
And how many drafts like do you do before a final? No, obviously it's going to depend, but
it depends. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's just, you know, a few things need rearranging, or you might find like the perfect word to kind of bring something off. I feel like that happened a lot in the first book, that I just reorganized, like I would rethink a few words and then feel like it was done. I don't know that I feel that way now, but it's too late, it's already out there.
Yeah. That happens. Definitely.
You just have to trust, you know, that if you love it, maybe somebody else will love it, you know?
So who do you write for? Do you have an audience in mind when you're writing? For us, obviously. Obviously, it's all about us.
Jamelia, wait, where are you exactly?
In London.
Oh, you're in London. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you live in the city itself, or do you live outside of London?
So
sorry, I shouldn't.
No, this is an interesting question, because I live on the outskirts, and my whole life people have told me that it doesn't deserve to be called London. And so I don't know how to answer that question. I think it is London. Yeah. A lot of people will tell you that it's not. It's too far.
Why would it not be?
Because it's far. It takes a long time to get here. It's not close to like main attractions. It's kind of green. It's on the edge of the countryside. So people write us off. They say that Croydon is not London, but it's called the London Borough. So I'm going to just go with London.
I think if you call it London, then it deserves to.
I mean, that's all that matters. I live here. So I think my opinion is the best, obviously.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree.
It's interesting though, because so I'm from Detroit, and there are suburbs, like very well-off suburbs, that when people say Detroit, I think Detroiters feel like, I think some of it, I don't know if this is a similar thing, but some of the issue is about concern for and about gentrification, right? Like people who say they're from Detroit, but they're from Rochester Hills. Shade.
Yeah.
No shade.
I understand. I definitely get that. There is a lot of gentrification.
I was like, that woman is not from Detroit. But anyway, anyway, you know, like Detroit was it's a place that has suffered. You know what I mean? Like we earned some stripes. And so you say you're from Rochester Hills, and then you come to the music scene and want to be known as being from Detroit. And so it's an interesting dynamic, because it feels like, well, if you said you're from Rochester, if you ever said you were from Rochester Hills, nobody would take you as seriously.
It was like claiming the grit of a place that you haven't experienced.
Yeah, I think it's a whole different.
I remember in one of the workshops we did at the
I wonder, that could be a trivia question. Do y'all know who I'm talking about?
Oh, shit.
Yeah, there's your competition. You know who I'm talking about without Googling it, then you get the book.
That's a good one. Then you win the whole book. Like, that's it. It's a great trivia. I think most people rely on Google, but you know. So when we had a workshop at the watering hole, I remember you gave us like some photos of random sticks to write about.
Oh, I did, from the red dirt beach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you often write to pictures, or does place influence how you write?
Nah,
not at all.
No, not really. You know, like, I mean, not that directly. That, you know what, that's actually one of the really beautiful things, I think, about teaching in those kind of settings, is because it puts you in a different headspace. You know what I mean? Like, coming up with prompts for you guys was helpful for me, because I wouldn't normally do that. I wouldn't normally go take pictures of a rock and then take the time to like print them out on my little printer in the kitchen and pass them around and like get the feedback. Like, teaching is also part of this whole process, because it makes you objectify the art in a way. And by objectify, I mean literally like make object of. Do you know what I mean? It's just not something I would normally do. Maybe I should, you know, but like the way that I normally write is, it feels more delayed than that. So, you know, I might be remembering the rocks, or I'll go to the museum and then I'll sit with it for a while. But I don't do that thing that you would do where you like, you know, you take your little notebook and
go sit by the river
and be like, Like, I wonder how many people still do that, like that kind of self-assignment, you know?
I usually only do it if I'm being forced to in a workshop setting. So
exactly, yeah, and it's a really interesting. So when you teach, you wind up doing that along with your students or with participants in the class, and it's like fresh in a way, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Someone wants to know how you sequence your poems. How do you decide? Do you print them all out? Do you?
In this case, in this case, Carl Phillips.
Wow, great. See?
I was like, help! I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, sequence is hard. You know what I don't do, because I've tried it before and I don't get it. When people lay their poem out on the floor, I don't understand that exactly. I mean, I guess with this book, I did kind of try to lay them out on the desk at the Coleman Center. And I don't know what it told me. I guess what it told me is like how they look, but it doesn't really tell me anything about order. Like, I think what I have to do is read the whole manuscript.
Right.
Several times, you know what I mean?
And then just shuffle.
I think about transitions, you know, like I think about how that poem I read to you, the ending of that leads into the poem which comes after that, which is Junebug. And the first line is fat thing with no direction but occasional flap. Like, okay, that seems, you know, there's a stillness at the end of that. So now like, let's let something take off a little bit. You know what I mean? As opposed to having something that's really flat. So I guess I'm always trying to not change, but shift, like transition. How does one thing move into another thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna say, like, one thing that I found when reading your book was the way you write in a way nobody else writes. The way you use words, the way you link images together. Where does that come from? How did you learn to do that is what I'm asking. Give us the secrets.
About imagery?
Yeah.
Well, one I think was trauma.
Okay, we don't want that, but we've probably experienced it anyway. We all have our own.
Every time somebody asks me this question, I know that there is a part of it that has to do with how images stuck in my head because of how I grew up. And like, you know, when crazy shit happens, things burn your brain. You know what I mean? Like, you're left with, and I don't just mean any one particular thing. Like, I grew up in Detroit. It was wild. My family was wild. My experiences were weird and wild. And so many of those things, I just have these, I feel like if I understand psychology right, shit burned my brain, and it's a stain that, like, I just have these intense impressions that are visual, that are eternal, and that carry with them almost a synesthetic quality. Like, I can see them, I can see them, I can smell them. So I think some of it might be innate, you know, to my experience. But the other part of it, and maybe because of that, you know, when I was in college and we started talking about the deep imagist, the Charles Olson and James Wright, and I was always like, those images, well, okay, some of them are very deep, and some of them feel not quite as psychically charged as I think of other, like when I think of charged psychic imagery, I think of someone like Amiri Baraka, or even some of Nikki Giovanni's early stuff, or Gail Jones. You know what I mean? Like, when I think of charged, like, because the notion of the deep image is that the images are solid enough and focused enough that just the mere mention of them carries like this psychic charge, psychological charge. And so when I think of that, I think, yeah, that's not the bird in the branch. That's not how I think of it. I think blood in the snow. There's this poem that Norman Dubie has called Funeral. Everybody talks about it because it ends, the cancer ate her like a horse, like horse piss in the snow. And I think that's the kind of imagery that feels like psychically charged to me. Like, that feels like a deep image, you know what I mean? So I got really interested in that kind of stuff. And I think I was reading people's work for like how that stuff works. Does that make sense?
Yes. So another question is, how do you know when a poem you have been revising is done, or is it ever done?
I think poems can always not be done. I mean, there are some things that feel like it's time for them to rest. Maybe like,
you're putting it to rest now.
Yeah, like, I'm done messing with this thing.
Yeah.
But I guess one thought is, if I can sort of leave a poem a little open, I suppose, a little, you know, possibility for something else. I'm thinking about Mary Ruffley has this book called Madness, Rack, and Honey. Am I talking about this right? And somewhere in there, she talks about the poems being like one long sentence, like everything you write being like part of one long sentence of your life. And so I think, okay, so where's a nice place to just put a semicolon? So like, maybe something will come after that. I guess I think of them as chapters more so than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, so when you teach, like, what craft books do you recommend to poets to?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see, teaching. Craft books have been a little difficult for me because it depends on, I've actually been looking for like the perfect book to teach with, and I don't know that it actually exists because I think of every book in terms of the class and the goal of the class.
Mm-hmm.
So I have used Ellen Bryant Voigt's Art of Syntax often. I have used Carl Phillips' Art of Daring often. I've used anthologies a lot. And then if there's things I've tried that, just I thought they might work and they really didn't. So I won't name those. But in some ways I feel like there's more of those that other people have recommended that I try them and I've tried and I just don't. You know what I want to try to teach with actually maybe this semester is Robert Pinsky's sound. What's it called? What is it called? It's on I can see it. It's got a white cover and it might just be like The Sound of Poetry or something. It's pretty small, but he has another book that is really good on like organization of lines. But I feel like, so I'm teaching undergrad class in the fall. I think it might be too much for that class. But I think I'm going to try to use the smaller book on sound because of how he's talking about thinking about arrangements and what's happening at the level of sound. I think I'll let you know. I'll report back.
Okay, great. Could we have like an old reading list for a class? I think a lot of poets that are starting out don't know what to be looking at, or
reading list.
Yeah, like that you would give to your class, like of books that they need to look at, or even poems that they should be reading.
I mean, I guess I could probably find something. I could tell you what we read this last semester. Last semester, I taught a class on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, confessionalism.
Ooh, okay.
And we read. So I can tell you what I would read again. Well, whatever. I'll tell you what we read. We read Sylvia Plath's Ariel. We read Insectants, Transformations. I wouldn't choose that book again. I had a reason for choosing it. I wouldn't choose that. But which one of Sectants? Probably the last one. God, why can't I think of any of the names of her books right now? Oh my God.
It's okay. We'll collate a list afterwards.
I would say that the last one, the one right before she died. And I would say, we read Robert Lowell's. You know the one, The Notebook. God, no, not the Notebook. Is it the Notebook? What is it? Life Studies. We read that. We read. I wanted to read Shane McCrae's Forgiveness, because it's so beautiful, but for whatever reason we couldn't get it, so I will put that in there. We read Vanessa Villarreal, Beast Meridian, which is beautiful. We read, what else did we read?
Unfortunately, I wasn't in the class, so I don't have anything to help you.
Help me out. We read, Berriman's Dream Songs. It was all the rage.
Nice.
No, we had some really interesting conversation about it though. We read, I was trying to think of the contemporary because there was Sharon Olds. I forget which one. Any of them would do, but it was the one about her marriage.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember what it's called, but I've read it.
With something Leap. It's terrible. Anyway.
Too many books to remember.
Stag's Leap. We read Marie Howe's, they're all like the most popular, the most well-known confessional text, and I can't remember that. Anyway, Marie Howe, Sharon Olds, Shane, Vanessa. There's somebody else that I'm missing. Anyway, so there's a course for you right there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we wanna help people out.
Oh, and Augustine, he was in there too. Although I don't know that we got to Augustine. That class was a lot. You know, if you want to teach a class on confessionalism, Jesus, you could pretty much, it could be a whole degree, actually.
Mm-hmm. Write a whole thesis on it.
A whole thesis.
What poem are you most excited about in your new collection?
I think the one I read you. Well, that may not be true. I mean, I'm excited about all of them. They're new.
Obviously, but was there one that you weren't expecting to make it in, that sneaked in at the last minute, or ones that got taken out?
At the last minute. I think that Kanye poem, I put that in pretty close to the last minute. And I was surprised that nobody was like, it's too long or it's formatted weird or, oh, actually, you know what? There's a poem in here called Bear Center that I was surprised that they were able to like format it the way that I wanted it to be formatted.
Oh, can we see it?
That's another long ass poem. But it looks like this.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, it's got some interesting things happening at the center. So. But I'm excited about them all, man. They're all amazing. So, you know, I think I'm supposed to give you a writing prompt, but now I'm trying to think of how to say this. So I think, you know, in terms of thinking about layering, I think that might be my writing prompt.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, does this work for you if you've never
written
give us before? Here's a writing prompt. Write a poem and put it in a box.
What kind of box?
Or
just put it in a box.
Put it in a box. Write a poem, print it out, put it in a box.
How long?
At least a week. And then when you come back to it, be surprised that you gave a shit about this a week ago. Because there'll be some element to your brain where you're like, I really cared about that 7 days ago. And then think, what is it about this poem that feels oddly and synchronicity? What's the word I want?
You said it.
Synchronously relevant to now, to today. There's something in there. I'm a big Jamelia. I'm a huge believer in synchronicity. Like, I don't think anything is, I don't know if I'm a fatalist or, you know, I have this argument all the time with the boyfriend about destiny. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, I agree.
I really believe that. So if you put that poem in the box and you come back to it in a week, you're going to be surprised.
Something in there's going to speak to us.
That you had to wait a week to address. You had to wait. That's the thing, that's the prompt. You had to wait a week. You couldn't have written it then, right? So what do you add to that now that you wouldn't have been able to do a week ago? And then keep doing that process. It's going to keep happening. Like, if you keep going back and looking at old stuff, you're always going to have something to say now that there's no way you could have said then. You know, like, that's literally my whole reflection strategy, because we get better as we age. You know, we get smarter about things when we think about them more. You know, we get smarter about Twitter posts when we set it aside and think about it for a minute.
In the drafts.
Put it in the drafts. Our first brain is not the best brain, you guys. I don't know what it is about us as primates, but we are not smart in the moment. The only thing we do well in the moment is survive. Like, we know how to, you know, ward off people and like react, you know, but like, we're really not very smart.
So to win a copy of the book, this is what you have to do. You have to write a poem, take a picture of it in the box, and then add something to it, layer it, and then let
But
us
you
know.
couldn't, no, add the thing to it, and then you have to say, well, I guess you don't have to say. What is the thing that a week from now you could not have said? You could have not have dealt with the week before today. A week from now, you could not have dealt with and that's what you take back to the poem. Like seriously, that's the prompt.
Yeah, no, that's a great prompt.
Okay.
I'm going to see what everybody on YouTube is going to say about your prompts. But I think it's a good method in terms of just thinking about editing in general and the revision process and the patience of sitting on a poem and not trying to fix everything in the moment.
Right. Totally.
So this is what you do with your thousands of folders that you have organized with your hundreds of poems that may never see the light of day.
So many folders. So many folders. I can't even.
So in terms of like poetry community is really important to me. When you write a poem that you're excited by, who do you call?
Nobody.
No one.
No, not really. Actually, lately I send them to my boyfriend, but he's not a poet, so.
What is the feedback? How is the feedback different?
With the not poet?
Yeah.
Well, he's really smart, so he always, non-poets always do that thing and they say, well, I don't know if this is the right read, but, and then they say something fucking brilliant. Like, yeah, dude, that's the right.
Yeah.
There's no stake, you know what I mean? Because it's not like he's gonna tell me to change a line or, call something a trope or tell me something cliche. There's no risk.
That's true. So you talked about earlier Carl Phillips helping with sequencing. In terms of like just the editing of the book, how long did it take and what were the stages?
Oh, I just told you they're all over the place. I mean, it's not.
But like the official stages of like getting a book to print.
Oh, it depends on the press. That process usually takes anywhere from a year to, for some people, I guess 2 or 3 years. I guess you can reasonably expect that once you submit a manuscript, it can make it out into the world as quickly as 9 months to a year. It really just depends on the press. This manuscript, because of the cycle that I submitted it, so that's the other thing, presses go on cycles, right? So sometimes it's not just like, this is as quickly as I can do it, but like, here's where we need to put you in the publication cycle. And with them, I guess it was like a year, more like a year and a half, I think. Yeah. So, but it depends on the press, really. Because like the second book was pretty fast. I think that was more closer to a year, if I remember correctly, but I don't know. I just assume it's going to be somewhere within 2 years.
Okay. So apart from
I have to go. But this has been amazing.
Yes. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
And I hope the Zoomers and YouTubers and Teamers and Skypers and Facebookers,
everybody,
FaceTimers,
everybody buy the book. It's out. It's out next week, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it is. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I'm so sorry I was late, but I'm glad we got to.
It's fine. All right.
Cool. Oh, are you going to send me this recording? I see that little recording button up there.
Yeah, well, it will be on our YouTube channel live anyway. So I'll send you the link.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
They're all saying thank you.
Have a good day in London.
Yes, well, it's like 9 o'clock now. So yes, I'm in London and I will have a good evening. Everyone on YouTube saying thank you so much for your time, wisdom, and your humor. They really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
I don't know how to get out. Oh, there it is.
Okay. Shade, your face is on there. So thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we look forward to receiving all of your feedback later on. And tune in next week as well. We've got Peter Khan here for a writing workshop.